welcome back to the VirtualLight broadcast. Now tell me, do you love the life you're living, or would you secretly like to press the reset button on your job, your relationship, or any other aspect of your life? Our next guest had an impressive career, a wonderful education, a healthy family, and social status, and yet she felt as though she'd completely missed the real brass ring. At the age of 40, Dianne Bischoff James devised her own midlife reboot. And after battling with depression, weight loss, divorce, cougar dating, the recession, and an encore career, she succeeded in renovating her entire life. Today, she's a life reboot specialist and a dynamic motivational speaker who encourages audiences to create a reality that is prosperous, deliberate, and meaningful. Dianne Bischoff Jones, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sandy. I'm so happy to be here.
So, you went through an incredible life change, and it was all as a self-starter. So tell us about why you got to the point where you felt your life wasn't working.
My story is a little unusual because I like to tell people I was outed by a psychic. At my 38th birthday, I went to see Sonia Choquette, who now is internationally known as a psychic healer. And I went to see her pretty much on a whim. It was a birthday present for myself, and I really thought that she was going to tell me that I was the cat's meow. I thought she was going to say, "You've got it going, girl. Everything about your life is great." I was well programmed, and I was living towards the American dream, what I'd been told to do. So I had an education from Northwestern, a master's. I had my own business. I had a mini mansion, house across from the lake in Chicago, family, 3 kids, and I did everything that I thought was the right thing to do to be happy. You know, get all the stuff. I also had a little red convertible and, you know, the Prada bag, the whole thing. And when I went to see her, she said for 1 hour, she took every one of my deep, dark, dirty secrets, piled them up, kind of took a bat and just kind of swung them. And she said I was this unlit Christmas tree. Everything about me was wrong, false, and that not a single bulb was firing. And she said, I hate to tell you, but, wrong career. You're supposed to be an actor, an author, a teacher, a healer. She said my relationship was fraternal and that it was more like a girlfriend relationship, which it was. And she said, I'm going to tell you something that most people don't know. She said, you're chronically and clinically depressed. And I hadn't told anyone. I was popping little white pills every day to get up and keep going, but I never exposed that about myself before. And also at the time, and she was polite enough not to say it, but I was 190 pounds. So I was grossly overweight and my body was breaking down. And she said, you're also going to be an actor. She said, you're one of the few people I could say would actually do well on camera and in theater and make a nice name for yourself. And she said, I'm going to tell you the last thing. You better hurry up and grab the real brass ring before it's too late. So for 1 hour, she completely undressed me. And I just remember sitting there, and it was a chair like this, and I was like digging into the side. And I said, well, wait, I got to ask you one question. Too late for what? Like, what happens if I don't do all these things? And she said, then you're going to hurry up, and you have to come back, and you're going to do this whole thing all over again. And then she kind of stood up and ran out of the room.
Did that devastate you?
It did. It was February in Chicago, and I walked to my car, and I remember having like red gloves on at the time, and I went inside, closed the door, and I just started sobbing. And I was putting my gloves to my face, and I was staining my face red with the gloves and everything all over my car. And I thought, how do you redo everything? Especially when you thought you were doing it right. I had the stuff. Isn't this what people are supposed to do? But what I realized is that at first I wanted to slay the messenger. I thought, okay, she's wrong. And how dare she? How dare she say all this about me? Mm-hmm. I'm a good person. I'm raising 3 children and making all this money.
Living the American dream.
Living the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
But as we all know, money doesn't buy you love, and it doesn't buy you happiness. And so I had to go home, and I had a macro reboot to do. It wasn't like someone said, oh, you're not in the best relationship, or perhaps you need to get a new job, or why don't you move, to another state. It was everything. It was a clean slate. So it took me a long time. She also left me a little message. She said, you need to write every day because people are going to really be able to relate to your stories. And quite frankly, I didn't know what she was talking about. I thought she wanted me to write a marketing book because I was a marketing and branding expert. So It took me about a year, but I started to sit down at the computer and just kind of put my hands on the keys and started to type. And I really thought I was going to write, how do you be a branding expert? But every time I sat down, this oozy, goozy, raw, juicy story started pouring out of me about how to be real and how to be authentic and how to start over. And so I figured I'd just go ahead and let that kind of flow. It was definitely flow from spirit, because I really didn't know what I was writing. And over 10 years, the book finally came together. It took me 10 years to redo every aspect of my life.
How did your family cope with this sudden change, and how did your husband cope?
Well,
It
that's
took
an
a lot of
excellent question.
courage to do that.
It is. I was in hiding for a long time. I still had all the masks and the veils up for several years. The first thing I did is I marched myself off to a place she told me to go. She said, read all these books. She gave me like 10 books to read. She said, you've got to go to Hoffman Institute. They're in California, and they're going to help you. It's like emotional rehab. She said, because you don't have a heart. Your heart is missing. It's completely out of your body. And she was right. So I went, and that was the impetus that started the change. For 7 days you go, and it's just, you deal with you, yourself, everything that you have that's inauthentic you get rid of, and you come back this brand new spanking kind of baby spirit. And for the first time I actually loved myself, gave myself some credit for everything I had done. And it was from that day forward that the family changed, because I was a better parent. I wasn't reacting to all these horrible patterns that I had from growing up and all the messages I had that were inauthentic. And I also took a hard look at the relationship and became very clean in expressing myself. And he was the butler and I was the maid. And I said, I don't know about you, but I can't expect my kids to have a healthy, happy life and find a partner in love if they don't see it. And they have to be able to see it at home. And we just don't have that. We're good people doing good things, but this was not a heart connection. So we became very clear and very clean, and he didn't want to make any of the changes. So we did the family house and lived in a way that was a cover-up for many years, where we were single and separated, but we didn't share it with the kids. Mm. In a way, I'm glad I did it that way, because I had the chance to be single in the city and go through cougar dating and find myself and become an actor and do everything that Sonia had told me to do without having the kids go through the hardship of knowing that their family, they were going to be kids of a divorce.
Where did they think you were going when you were out on your cougar dates?
I ask them that now, because I still kept the red convertible. That part was fun. They said they remember a time when I seemed very happy. It was a lot of fun.
Cougar dating does that for you.
It was a lot of fun. But I wasn't around as much. But I think because I was shifting, and I wasn't a rageaholic anymore. I had grown up with very strict parents. You know, my dad's German and ex-military, and everything used to be, waiting for the next outburst. And I picked up those patterns, and I hated it about myself. So I was the kind of parent where kids would come in and, as you know, kick off the shoe spins, lands on my beautiful new coffee pot, or it breaks it into a million pieces, because it was this beautiful piece of pottery. And I remember myself looking at my son at the time, and I said, I hope you have a way to find a new one and repair that. I mean, how are you going to fix these things? I didn't go crazy. I was this calm, cool, collected person that I always wanted to be. So I think they were happier with their mom. And the acting was also a lot of fun.
Was acting something that you'd always had a secret yearning for? I mean, was Sonia right there, or was that a surprise?
I believe the messages are almost always with us when we're children. And so I was the high school musical superstar. Like that did anything for me. But my father had left me with a very clear message. He said, acting is a terrible career. I will not support you. You will not pursue it. And I'm like, sir, yes, sir. I will not pursue it. So I went straight into my head, and I became, all intellect, all brain.
What he expected you to be.
That's what he wanted us to do. He had modeled that about money and power and business. Business is the way to go. He had said you could be three things: a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, or an engineer. And if you do one of those four things, one of those four choices, you're going to be a happy person. So my brother One brother's a lawyer, was a lawyer. One brother's a doctor. And I was the big rebellious person because I didn't want to do any of those. So I was a marketing expert who worked with engineering companies. That was my little rebellious move at the time. So, so the acting was very near and dear to my heart, and I'd always wanted to do it, but I didn't know how to be also 190 pounds because I had all those tapes running. Actors are attractive, actors are thin, actors are talented. And I never gave myself any credit for having any talent or eventually being able to get fit. And it wasn't until I went to Hoffman and at the end of this program, you don't identify your roles. You don't tell anyone who you are, really. It's kind of anonymous. But at the very end, you get to stand up and say what you did. And honestly, I stood up and I said, I'm an actor and I'm a writer. And everybody was like clapping and they're like, oh, that's wonderful. Look what this woman did. And I walked away thinking, no, you're just a big fat liar. And so I don't know why those words came out of my mouth. I think I knew in my heart I wanted to do that, but I didn't have the confidence. So I left there thinking, I'm going to make it real. I am not going to be a liar for long. Well, I got back from Hoffman and I decided to make it real and make this my new life. So I laced myself up, literally with a corset. I had a big flouncy skirt, boots, covered myself up every way possible so no one would notice that I was overweight. And I didn't care that I had not sung in about 20 years. I marched myself off to this audition, and there was this table of, they call them auditors, you know, the director and the producer, and the little man on the piano, and started singing the world's worst rendition of Wouldn't It Be Loverly, because it was the only song I knew. And literally for the only time in my life, my hands were shaking uncontrollably to the point where I had to pin them behind my back. And I just finished it and I took like a little bow. And then I wanted to slink to the door because it was so embarrassing. But they were very kind to me. And the director actually said, okay, you know, at first she was looking down like, what was that? You know, that whole Simon Cowell look like, maybe want to rethink that career. But she handed me actually a script, and the script was for Nancy, which is the lead role. And I couldn't believe the woman handed me the script. I figured she was just being nice. But somehow I started reading it. I dropped into a Cockney accent, and I started, oh, Oliver this and Oliver that. And I did the whole thing. I handed it to her, and I had so much fun. I went out, I finished the audition, and I jumped up and down in the snow, just celebrating the fact that I showed up. And I waited and waited 7 long, grueling days until they finally called me. And they said, Dianne? I'm like, yes. And they're like, we'd like to offer you a role. I'm like, yeah. And I thought, okay, it's Nancy, right? My one big audition, I'm going to get the lead. They said, we'd like you to be townsperson 1. I didn't even have a name. I was so happy, Sandy. I honestly, I felt like I just won an Oscar because I was no longer a liar. I was now an actor, and I was going to make this amazing. So I danced and sang for 3 months on set for community theater. I lost about 40 pounds. And
Through the dancing?
Through the dancing and the singing. It just felt good to be there.
Yeah.
And food wasn't love.
Yeah.
I think that was the trick. Food was no longer love.
Yeah.
It just felt good to be there. It felt good to be in the light. It felt good to dance. It felt good to move. And to know I had made this now a part of my life. So it was great.
And you went on to lose 56 pounds, to be in many, many films,
Yes.
productions, made a success as an actress. But it wasn't all plain sailing, was it? I mean, you hit financial recession, you had some difficult times in your relationships with some of the guys that you met.
Yes.
You kind of went back and did it all over again, didn't you? I mean, what people do in their teenage years.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes I felt like I was back in summer camp because, you know, you get to experiment and try all these things on, and you don't know for sure whether you're going to like archery or, you know, or swimming. But I got to try it all back on. I had many relationships that were, in many ways it was fun because I didn't have an agenda. So I think that made me kind of attractive. I wasn't trying to have a family. I wasn't trying to get remarried. And I think that makes you kind of a man magnet in a way. And so that part was very fun.
Yes.
But part of it was that I also had fell in love with this beautiful man who was a world-class alcoholic. And one of the stories that people really like from the book is that story because I felt as if I experienced the light of heaven and the darkness of hell all in the same period of time. And I didn't know it about myself, but I put on a codependent nurse's outfit, and I made it my point in life to try to save him from his own addiction, which I know happens for many people when you get involved with those type of relationships. And I saw something I'd never seen. I saw the dark side of life. I saw trouble with the law, massive illness. I saw, dishonesty, and everything of what he said was a lie. And I had to go through that and come out the other side and finally put the boundaries up, and finally had a dangerous situation happen where I really thought I was going to get hurt. And that was the first moment where remember after that happened thinking, how could I put myself in a situation where I could hurt myself or the children? And that was my wake up. I had the almost getting to the point where I was going to be beaten to stop. And everything came back, my senses came back, and I thought, I'm more important than this. I mean, everything about my life I love. I can't do this. So I put up the boundaries, ended that relationship, and I won't do a spoiler alert, but it ended.
At what point did you decide to change your career and become a midlife revisionist?
I did what Sonia said. I started writing every day. And it took a long time. It took me longer than probably most authors. It took about 10 years. And I started capturing all these different stories and showing this perspective of finding what I call accountable authenticity. It's one thing to be real, but it's another thing to hold your feet to the fire and to make this happen without getting distracted or without getting lost or without having the perseverance to continue. So I made myself, tied myself to my chair and made myself write. And I put a little timer on and would make sure that I did it every day. And it took a very long time. But I realized the stories that were pouring out might be helpful. And I was very lucky because my daughter was very encouraging. And I started reading her little snippet, and she said, you have to finish. You just have to finish this. And so I didn't want to finish, actually. I didn't consider myself to be an author or a writer. But I felt like every time I got plugged in and the keyboard started moving, that it was something that was going to be helpful. So I kept going, and it took about 10 years to do it. And then I figured, okay, no one's going to like it. I'm going to write this thing, and no one's going to like it. And then I had to deal with, I think, the biggest fear, the concern that most people have is fear.
Yeah.
Fear of lack, fear of rejection,
of failure.
Fear of failure. What about fear of success?
Yes.
What if it does work?
Yes.
What if people actually do like it? Or what if everybody says it's terrible? And I had to march myself through the fear, march myself back through the fear, and realize that if one person gets anything from this, then this is a worthwhile project. So I had to go back to the very basics because my fear of finishing it was so tremendous that I couldn't imagine having anybody reject it. And then I had a huge fear from my family because we were professional cover-up artists. And what happens when you expose everything and you're actually going to tell people these dirty secrets? Oh my goodness, I take Prozac. Oh my goodness, I actually thought about hurting myself.
Yeah.
Or I'm not in a loving relationship. What if I actually stand up for myself? And we didn't do that. We're sweepers. And I say we have a rug, and it's in the middle of the family room, and it's 20 feet tall, and everything that's ever been swept is under that rug. And I took the top off the rug. So that was a huge fear of mine, to deal with the rejection.
When you were writing the book, did you think that you would one day turn your knowledge into a new career for yourself, beyond the book?
I had hoped, because I'd always enjoyed working with people, and I just love people, and I have been well, they call me at home, they call me a witch doctor, because I have a lot of natural intuitive abilities, and a therapist, of which I have only a bachelor's in psychology. But I've been doing consulting for my whole life. When someone had an issue, they would call me. And I've always been able to have kind of an intuitive sense. I can see through a lot of the masks. I can help people expose some issues so that I can kind of be clean, clear, and very direct, but in a very loving way. So I've always had these abilities, and I've always loved to do it. So working with people has just been kind of a natural outpouring of this. And creating the workshops, again, it flowed as if it had always just been there, just dying to come out. So that's probably the easiest and one of the most enjoyable things that I get to do.
Now you use many tools. I mean, your background in marketing. You also, law of attraction. You use all kinds of spiritual tools as well to help people reimagine their life and change it. Tell us about some of those tools. I mean, some of those steps that you take people through.
In a nutshell, I think it's easiest to explain that with the 3 statements I like to use. Get clear, get going, and then get happy. Clarity seems to be one of the key issues with a lot of people that I help and I consult with, in that they either have had messages and ideas just as I had growing up, things that you love to do, and they've just never acknowledged it, or they've never felt like they could make a career doing it, or they just never had the confidence and the self-love to say it's worth pursuing. I don't care what happens. So clarity, we use a lot of exercises. The answers are always within us. So we use a lot of meditative exercises, a lot of dyads, where you can work with other people, and you allow someone that you don't know, especially in workshops, you can always pair it with someone you don't know, where you can come clean in about 1 second, where you can just ask for the response and let it come from the heart, not the head. And so we work a lot with dyads. And then as far as the get going part, that's the accountability part. It's easy to know that, I've always loved horses and I've always enjoyed education. But to actually go back and try to do hippotherapy, or the type of working with animals, working with people, where they can get very grounded and very real, that's a whole science. Sometimes you have to go back to school. Sometimes you actually have to apply yourself. And so we like to work with people on, again, more exercises that help everyone get clear. But in between those two, between getting clear and get going, lies lack, sense of lack. So what I found is that the lack seems to fall in 3 camps. It's either lack of self-acceptance, which pretty much is self-love, lack of means, I'll never be able to feed my family, there's no way this is going to work, or lack of acceptance, which is usually other people are going to judge me, or I'm going to end up in that one place where nobody wants to be, and that's alone, which is always the ultimate irony, because loving yourself and being alone is one of the best gifts in the world.
Absolutely.
And when you do love your own company and aren't looking for all these other agendas on trying to make other people happy, and focus on I created 14 rules for happy living. And these 14 rules is how I reorganize my entire life. It's what we use in all of our sessions. And one of them is, you only have one circle, and that's your circle. You don't get to control the other person's circle. I can't control your circle. I sure can't control the universe's circle. And when I really focus on my circle and staying in it, I am responsible for my own joy. And everything else is a choice. So we talk a lot about the 14 rules and about managing your wave, because we're beings of light.
Yes.
We're all,
yes.
Nothing's linear, nothing's straight. These are waves, and they're going up and down. And our ultimate choice is to always grab at the happy end of the wave. I can always come up with a thought that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
I don't care what's happened. And so it is remarkable how simple shifts in that energy, and knowing that speaking your piece, coming clean in a healthy, happy way, which I think has led to the happiest relationships and the happiest time in my life, is always being able to speak my piece, even if it's really scary to say what you're about to say.
Did you ever go back to Sonia Choquette and say thank you?
I did, actually. I have talked to her right before the book was about to come out, and she gave me an endorsement. And I think I was gushing. I said I was pretty mad at you at the time when you told me all this, but I have to tell you that I really appreciate what you did. You gave me the big kick in the seat of the pants. you moved me forward, and I've admired your career, and I was kind of nervous at the time, and I was like, I was wondering if you could give me an endorsement. And she said, I would be happy to. I've just been waiting for you to finish the book. So she knew. She knew
Yeah.
it was going to come about, and she said, I can see your soul and I can see your journey, and she said, I'm more than happy to, be part of the light working team with you. And so, she was wonderful. She also told me something that was pretty interesting. She said, and she's a very strong person, so I'll kind of say it the way she did. I'm telling you right now, do not evaluate your success on this book, on anything that you're going to do. Give yourself 18 months before you even look at it. She said, do not. And she was like, I could see she was like pounding her fist on the other side of the phone. And I thought, wow, what an interesting message. Because sometimes, our guides will say things that don't make sense at the time. I didn't know what she was talking about. But now, a year into it, I know what she was talking about. There were times when there was dips. There was times when no one would call me back. There was times when I had to change people who were working with me. I had to let go of an editor. I had to sit in that place of, wow, this took 10 years, and I said, I'm a 2-month wonder. How could this be 10-year journey, and it's only going to be 2 months, and the whole thing flops? And I remembered what she said. She said, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And get ready for the marathon. And I thought, okay, great message, great insight. And since then, it's just been the next fun piece.
And now you're doing workshops and expos all over the country. You're appearing at Conscious Life next month
Yes.
in LA.
A couple weeks.
And you're also doing your workshops everywhere.
Yes.
Wow, what a story. So is there anything else that you would change? Or is that it?
Well, we're going to change and move. We do this wonderful exercise in the workshops where you get to write down a love it inventory, everything I love, and I love the water. So the family knows we're planning on moving in about 12 to 16 months, because I have a natural break, and I'm going to move probably out west or out east, haven't quite decided, but somewhere near the water. Just trying to get really authentic and real with myself, and continue to create the life that I love.
Good for you. The real brass ring. Change your life course now. Dianne Bischoff James, thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a few moments.